I'm back. All right, so now we're going to talk more about that right hemisphere. I told you there's a lot of brain work in this because this is, I'm trying to give you what's the latest and greatest, and that changes like daily. So at least within the last year or so, the best I've heard of it. So let me put me down here. So right hemispheres in stress. So remember, baby's right hemisphere is online, working mostly. That is definitely implicit, sort of unconscious learning, intaking of emotional and social information that is then regulating and firing and wiring the nervous system in the brain. And the baby is learning how to respond, how to get their needs met. They're learning a lot in this, what they can expect from their caregiver. And so let's just keep going. So network for rapid response to threat and danger. This is the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere monitors our fight and flight system. So the right amygdala, there's one on each side. The right amygdala can detect safety or danger in 60 milliseconds. It takes 250 milliseconds for it to become conscious to the frontal cortex. So the amygdala and the limbic system and the emotional centers are going to determine if something is a threat or if something is safe much faster than we can ever think logically about it. And a baby can't think logically anyway. So this is their system. And think about 60 milliseconds. And remember that they're reading faces. They're reading non-verbal information. They're reading tone of voice. So that goes to, a frustrated parent whose, baby is crying, or a parent who's not easily regulated themselves or something. Even a look that is so just for a moment that the right amygdala can pick up and can set up a sentinel. I like using the meerkat now as my metaphor for the amygdala. It's like the sentinel on the rock, Timon, or whatever his name is, that he's looking out for danger, and it can set off an alarm in that before we even think a child has seen us, within a tone of voice, in 60 milliseconds, very little bit of time. Even if, so a baby learning to pick up these things, and their one expertise is in faces. All right, so I know I keep saying the same thing, sorry. So the right hemisphere regulates the stress regulating HPA axis. So the HPA axis is our hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenocortical axis. And it's one of its primary jobs is to regulate the output of cortisol and the stress hormone. It's very much, and what we see like in adolescence is the reason that in adolescence depression and anxiety are so much, come about so much more is often because of dysregulation in the HPA axis. And it might get dysregulated more or something due to hormones or some underwriting dysregulation of it can come out more. So if you look down here at the bottom of this, it says every major psychiatric disorder has a dysregulation of stress and emotions in the HPA axis. So this is an important part of our physiobiological, neurobiological system that goes along with how we grow up, what our emotional intelligence is as we grow up, how well we do at being aware of and regulating our emotions. And HPA controls vital functions to support survival and ability to cope with challenges. Studies now show that one parent is primarily responsible for helping shape the stress mechanism in an infant. In nuclear families, this is usually the mother. Non-nuclear families, it may not be. Mother in first year is helping set up the right brain of the infant by down-regulating the stress response and up-regulating positive emotion. And this basically fires and wires up our HPA axis. How well does this fire and wire up in that first year of life? Now, I'm not saying, every child is wired differently, and a child's temperament comes into play here. Some children want to be touched. Some babies want to be touched more than others. Some come out more easily to soothe than others. There is some innate wiring mechanisms here. And then, a child who either doesn't respond to touch as much, or doesn't like to be soothed, or can't be soothed, then a parent is going to respond like, I can't soothe my child, and they get frustrated, and this can become a cycle. So all of this is, again, within the norm and within an understanding that there has to be a goodness of fit between mother and child when this is going on. But this first year of life, we are helping. This is part of what is being built. This is part of the construction zone, is the HPA axis, and how well we later deal with stress. Seat of the right hemisphere could be considered the seat of the unconscious and the core of the self. By 5 to 17 days, there are 2 well-organized hemispheres with distinct functions. We always have the 2 hemispheres, but they're not quite as distinct, within their systems. So they're getting more and more distinct. The right brain is first to develop, in charge of nonverbal communication, face, tone, gesture, smells. There's more space in the brain for processing the face of a female than a male. Thought that was just I don't know a lot about that statement, but I thought it was an interesting statement that Shore made. 2, 4, and 5-month-old infants have enhanced activity in the right prefrontal cortex when shown female images. So that may be what that is. That there's more activity, especially in the right side of the brain, when they see female images than when they see male images. This is another interesting thing from research, that holding a baby on the left side channels feedback through the mother's right hemisphere, because it's easier, like that's the part that's sort of facing the child. And the mother's voice lullabies will not, and the left side is managed, developed by the left side is managed by the right side of the brain. So the mother's voice lullabies will not sound or feel the same if baby is on the other side. And when they're held on the left side, they can more feel the mother's emotional presence. These are just little facts I found interesting. Infant communication, building a self, and the birth of emotional intelligence. The essential task of the first year is co-creation of bond between infant and caregiver. It's the child's first relationship. The one with the mother acts as a template as it permanently molds the individual's capacity to enter into all other emotional relationships. These early experiences shape the development of the unique personality. How well an adult reads, research has shown, how well an adult reads right brain cues in social situations depend on early experiences where we've seen, heard, and known as children. The right hemisphere is tied to social intelligence, ability to identify social stimuli, others' intentions, relationship dynamics, and to successfully handle those situations. These are all capacities of emotional intelligence. Those with right hemisphere deficits have difficulty processing intimate social relationships. They misinterpret motives, they can't read faces, they have trouble navigating culture. So what we're saying is it's this first year in this attunement attachment stage when this right brain is getting wired up in whatever way it's going to get wired up, dependent upon the experiences that it has. The more connections we have between the right prefrontal cortex, between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, the more ability to manage our emotions, because it's the prefrontal cortex that inhibits the amygdala, that inhibits the limbic system from taking over and going wild. So the more we can connect those two together, we can regulate the ability, we can teach and display and model and create the mechanisms for that regulation, the better. So connect, disconnect, dysregulate, repair, the cycle of resilience. So the big cycle of a secure attachment, which is what, if we go back to Bowlby, when he worked with Mary Ainsworth, she came up with what's called the strange situation, which created looking at different types of attachment. And secure attachment, of course, is what we want children to have. And the cycle of secure attachment looks like this, that there isn't that attunement, that right brain to right brain communication, that baby is down, that the mother or the caregiver is able to down regulate the stress and up regulate the positive emotion. Now, in life, mom can't or dad can't, nobody can just sit around and do that 24/7. It just isn't possible. A phone rings, you got to take a shower, you got to go to the bathroom, you got to eat food. These things happen. So there's going to be a disruption, disconnect between the caregiver and the child. It's going to happen. This is going to dysregulate the baby. It's going to upset them. They don't like this happening. So the disconnection happens, or it can just be that and this can happen in older relationships. There can be a rupture. There's a fight. There's a disagreement. Mom gets upset and walks away. The key to all of it, to creating a secure attachment or to secure relationships in any time in life, is repair through reconnection. That there is quick repair for infants. That it doesn't last. I had a student once ask me, how long can there be between the rupture and the repair? And we're going to see something that takes place only over a course of like a minute or two at the most. And we see what happens, what kind of dysregulation occurs. And so it needs to be rather quick in infants or in children. But this repair through reconnection, time to dysregulate and reconnect, can plant seeds of resilience. So if we're just attuning all the time, then a child never learns what it is. Because during those times of disconnect, the child has to determine what to do with themselves. They may cry louder. They may learn to soothe. That over time, longer periods of this allow them to, but as long as they know somebody's coming back, then they're better off. And coming back within a good amount of time. And if they've come to trust that as something that can be counted and relied upon, then they become more resilient. Serve and return. Babies seek engagement. They seek what we call proximity, to be close to their caregivers. That's their attachment behavior. When they start becoming mobile and they crawl after mom or they wave their hands up, they're seeking that attachment, that proximity, the desire to connect, to be seen, known, and heard. So here is, I'm going to, hold on, we're going to watch a video really quick together. Okay, so we are going to watch what's called the still face experiment. This is only under 3 minutes, so here we go.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
My good girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
So it's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So we saw in that video that reparation is key. It's kind of spooky to me to see that mother just be able to turn it all off. I think she must be an actress. But we saw how quickly that baby could dysregulate, and that as humans, we really don't like still faces like that. We don't like, any of us, when somebody just looks at us blandly. Babies really don't like it, and that just shows it. Even though mom is right there, the fact that she's not responding, that she's not doing what we call that serve and return. There's another video that I will ask you to watch on your own. It's on this page of right here, and this one right here, the second one under here, and it's on serve and return. And it's that give and take, and babies expect that. That's experience expectant to some extent. This whole attachment thing is experience expectant. And so as we're wiring up that right brain, and but you could just see how dysregulated baby got. But that's obviously a very securely attached baby, because as soon as mom was back online, baby was back online. She was happy, she was okay. We have one more slide here. So attachment, really with the onset of mobility, kind of we move from the idea of attunement to attachment, because baby doesn't sit around so you can face-to-face gaze him anymore. I've tried to get my son to do it, he won't. So Mary Ainsworth, as I've talked about with John Bowlby, was sort of the mother of this type of attachment. And she came up with 4 different styles: secure, insecure avoidant, insecure ambivalent, or resistant, and disorganized. So I'm going to let you watch this strange situation with Mary Ainsworth by yourself, but please do, because it'll show a child that is securely attached, a child that is insecure avoidant, which is exceptionally sad. And if you watch the screencast on Piaget stages, when I talked about sadness not being natural in babies, you see sadness in this baby, and what that looks like. Very avoidant. And insecure ambivalent. The word ambivalent meaning, we think of it as meaning not caring, but being more of a tug of war. I want, I don't want, I want, I don't want. And what's really interesting about this is the idea that the belief that these styles not only are developed during childhood, but that development is carried out, that we kind of create these styles with our primary caretaker. We might have a different style with different caretakers, but we create these, and they help create our working models of what we expect from other people, what we expect, who we think we are, and what we deserve within a relationship, what we have to do. Babies begin to create coping mechanisms, because you'll see that in the different styles. Like the avoidant baby has learned to just withdraw, because obviously mother or caretaker is not predictable, is not available. Insecure ambivalent children some babies might scream louder. They might get mad. They begin to create coping mechanisms, or defense mechanisms even, but coping mechanisms for how to get their needs met, how to cope with periods of rupture and dysregulation. Some of those are good and some are not so good. But in children, they're early coping mechanisms. But what can happen, what we see in disorganized, this is another, you'll see down here, this Psych Alive link. Really, I would really watch all of those. They're very short little things with Dan Siegel, psychiatrist Dan Siegel, and talking about that. But what's interesting to think about is, how do these first attachment styles show up in adults later? How do we begin to display them in our relationships as we age and as we come into adolescence or then adulthood? How does the insecure ambivalent, is that might, the person who clings, the person who never trusts that somebody's going to be there but wants them to be there, the insecure avoidant who's afraid of commitment or doesn't ever seek intimacy or attachments, who doesn't trust anybody but themselves. Disorganized, we see more in substance abuse and psychiatric problems and so forth. So that's another thing they look at for attachment, is not just what this happens in the child, which is so vital, but how it is wiring up that brain for future implicit, for how it's wiring implicit learning that shows up in future working models. Okay, so I am going to ask that you watch those on your own, and they're really, really interesting. And if you have time, listen to Siegel talk about these. All right, that is all I am going to offer on this section in terms of a screencast. And so, yay. Questions, please. And if you have them, let me know. Take care.